Good evening, everyone. This is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. Tonight, my guest is Monai Gregg Stephens. I found Monai by doing some research on child trafficking, and I came across a video that she had done, which took a lot of courage to do, by the way, on black adrenochrome, and it just totally blew me away. And it was such heavy material uh, because I really didn't know about this aspect of adrenochrome, which adrenochrome is, harvesting is bad enough, but this aspect of it was it floored me. It really put me in a really just bad place. I was extremely saddened by it. So I caution the audience just to, maybe pause this podcast and maybe do a little prayer if you want to, or meditate, do a mantra if that helps you, just so that you can listen to this objectively without attaching any emotion to it, because it really is kind of heavy. So, Monai, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. It took us a little time to find each other. It took me a while to find you and
Right?
then to actually connect with you. But
Right.
I am extremely, extremely, you know, in gratitude that you went ahead and accepted, because the information that you have to share with the world is extremely important. So, can you start telling us a little bit about, well, a little bit or as much as you want to, about your background and what led you to this point today?
Yes. And thank you so much for having me tonight. I am very appreciative. I'm very grateful. I'm glad that we finally connected because when I initially made that adrenochrome video, it was back in 2016. I had just come across the information and there was nobody talking about it. So I'm grateful for us to have connected at this time. I think it was absolutely divine orchestration, divine timing for us to come
Indeed,
together.
indeed.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Monai Gregg Stephens. Some people know me by Divine Naga. Some of my videos came out under that name. Um, Originally, I was a Christian. I started out in the Christian church. It was Word of Faith Christian Church.
Gotcha.
I was there for almost 10 years, and I was always a little. I felt like I was more devout than the average Christian that I would see in church. I was doing a lot of studying. I was going outside of the Bible when we were told not to.
Mm.
And so I ended up getting over into the deliverance part of ministry. And while I was over there, I connected to several individuals. Well, I connected to one through a blog talk radio
Hmm.
show. And this individual intrigued me because one of the things she talked about was how the children were being attacked. And so I started listening more and started helping out. But what I discovered was that a lot of the attacks on the children were coming from individuals that we trusted. Um, Police departments, people who position themselves in schools, who position themselves in daycares, and that floored me. And there was one tracking that we were doing in particular where we were tracking a little 4-year-old girl, and at the end of that, we discovered that it was her parents who had actually offered her up as a
Ooh.
sacrifice.
Oh God. Oh.
And it took about 2 weeks. I cried for about 2 weeks because I didn't know how to process that. Because as you can understand, I had no idea about any of this. I had never gone down any rabbit holes. That was the first rabbit hole that I actually went down.
Hmm.
And to discover that it terrified me because I felt like if there's no one, who do you call
Yep.
when the very ones that are supposed to be protecting the children are the ones that are abusing them? And so I felt very alone, and there was nobody that I could talk to about it because when I started trying to inform individuals about this, for some reason there would be it would almost be like a wall would go up, like they would glaze over, like they didn't want to talk about it. It was too hard to accept, too hard to understand,
Yeah.
because these are people who have no idea that there's a whole nother world that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Um, and so there was no one for me to talk to about it. And at that point, I began researching on my own. And during that time, again, I was a devout Christian, served in the church, and I would never have left my church because I was that much in love with it, in love with my church family. But now that I look back on it, I believe it was divinely orchestrated because I started seeing things in the church that just wasn't adding up for me.
Hmm.
And but I would never have left. But there was a situation that happened with my son, and I think that that was the only thing that would get me to actually leave. And I didn't leave at that time. I took a hiatus. We were going to take a 6 month hiatus to
Hmm.
give us a chance to figure things out. And during that time that I was away from the church, I looked at the church channel and TBN constantly. It was always playing, and I remember hearing something that Creflo Dollar said. He's a part of the Word of Faith ministry. He said something, and I immediately knew that wasn't right. So I started digging. That's what led to it. I started digging, and you know how you dig and you find if you find one lie,
Hmm.
then you begin to find them all, and it started unraveling. And everything that I thought I knew about religion was removed. It was as if my safety net had been wiped from up under me. And that was the catalyst that led me into my spiritual awakening. It started with my dark night of the soul. So that's how I began this journey. And that started around 2012. And there was no one else around me at that time that was having a similar experience. What I actually experienced is what a lot of other individuals that I later would connect with. Um, we all shared the same experience where when we left the church, it was as if the church people came for us to get us back into church, and they
Hmm.
used fear. It was like, don't stay out there too long, the devil is going to get you, you better get back under your covering. Those were the types of calls that I was receiving, the types of messages that I was getting.
Hmm.
And but I couldn't go back. I could not go back because I was being shown one thing on one hand, and I'm going back to what I had been told all my life because I went to Catholic school since I was in kindergarten.
Wow.
So that was my foundation. So on one hand, I'm finding these things out and I'm digging and looking, and I was I was literally digging because I was trying to disprove what I was seeing. I
Right.
was trying to find information that would solidify what I had already known. And I didn't. The more I dug, the more I was proving
Yeah.
that what I had grown up under was not the truth.
Wow. Wow. Let me ask you, what was, let's say, one of the first untruths that you discovered that kind of led you down that rabbit hole?
Tithing. Um,
Tithing. Hmm.
and I guess it was, I don't know why that was why I was tithing, but I
Interesting.
remember looking up the scripture, and this is how I got into etymology because I started digging up the root words, and I actually went back to the original Aramaic, the ancient Aramaic, and I started looking the root words up of the Hebrew language to find out what the scriptures really meant. And that's when I began to find out that there were double meanings. It wasn't the way it was being taught to us wasn't really what it was saying. And that was the first thing that I discovered, that the tithe was not actual money. And even though that's a small thing to some people at that time, I guess that's why the divine used that, because my husband and I, we were okay, but we weren't doing that great, but we were giving like $800 a month.
Wow.
And so when I discovered that, it was like, okay, if that's wrong, then what else is wrong?
Yeah.
What else, and I just went and started digging, and I had this ability, and I believe it was given by my highest guidance, by the divine, in order for me to see the discrepancies that were actually in the scriptures. Um, because you know how they tell you need to study line upon line,
Hmm.
precept upon precept,
Sure.
and I was able to see some of the things that were different between Old Testament and New Testament. And that's how I was able to see some of the things that were changed just a little bit
Hmm.
through translation, transliteration. I was able to see those changes. And so that's what led to where I am now.
Wow.
I did not lose my spiritual connection. So I'm
Hmm.
in no way saying that I don't believe in the creator. I do. As a matter of fact, that whole process just it just really solidified my relationship with the creator even more, because all of the things that had been um I guess the extra embellishments had been removed. And
Yeah.
so I was able to get a closer connection to the creator. Um, there was something else I was going to say, and it went out of my mind. But
It's okay.
but yeah, that is what led to where I am now. I'm still deeply connected, still deeply spiritual.
Hmm.
And oh, this is what I wanted to say. I wanted to ask you, did you ever do a video,
I
Kodesh?
did. Yes.
Okay, so I told my husband this. After we spoke, I set up in bed. Remember I told you, I said I used to listen to your videos and I would
Yep.
share your videos.
Yep.
When I was having like these realizations, and I was trying to figure out about Jesus, and it was your video. They used you in order to show me the difference between the created Jesus and Yeshua. And it was your video, Kadesh, Kadesh. I used to play it. There were so many different renditions out there, and it
Uh-huh.
was your rendition that I played over and over. And I remember crying to that.
Wow.
It
Me
was so
too. I cried to
beautiful.
that too.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was so beautiful, and it sounded so angelic. And I woke up in the bed the other night and I said, that's where I remember you from. So the fact that you found me
It's
through something
amazing.
completely different, I know that's divine for us to connect at this time. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Absolutely. That just made my day. It's really, wow, that's amazing. So you have nothing to do right now with the Christian faith, or do you maybe just kept a couple of things, or are you just totally on a different path altogether? You're spiritual, but you're not really gravitating to anything that the Christian traditional religion would,
Right.
right, I gotcha.
Well, I actually followed Yeshua, and I was
Right.
connected
Sure.
back to Yeshua and the Essenes, and I
Yes.
went back and I got his original teachings. That is what I followed.
Oh, wow. You're blowing me
And
away. That's so awesome.
and
That's
that
so
was what I
awesome.
was looking for. As a matter of fact, when I was in church, I felt, even though I was there, I felt a disconnect because I kept trying to, I was like, there's something here that I need, and I'm not able to get to it. And I was trying to read everything that I could. I was studying my scriptures. I was doing everything. And I felt that there was some type of blockage between myself and where I was trying, the source, where I was trying
Yes.
to get to. And once I found out the difference between Jesus and Yeshua, and then I started reading, and you know how truth has a frequency. When I read those words, I knew that those were the true words. I
Hmm.
knew that that was the true teaching, even down to how we're supposed to do our diet, how the Essenes taught about fasting, how Yeshua taught about the internal baptism. All of that just resonated with me, and that's what I had been looking for. That's what I had been searching for, that I could not find in the Christian church.
So can you like articulate for the audience in your own words of your interpretation of it, what the difference would be between the traditional Jesus and Yeshua, if you can?
Um, right. In my studies, I guess I went down this rabbit hole where I start finding out about the Church of Nicaea.
Okay.
That was what led me to them creating Jesus. And off the top of my head, I can't remember all the details that I was discovering back then, but after I was, because again, at that time, I was trying to debunk, and I was trying to prove that Jesus was real. And the more I dug, and the more information that I was being guided to, it was showing me that Jesus was created. Yeshua was the real Christ. And then it broke down, what Christ was. And I remember trying to figure out the difference between Messianic and Christian.
Hmm.
And I was being shown all of that. So that was what I discovered first. And I went and read all of the Church of Nicaea, and how them translating the Bible and all of that came about. And it was just so much information, and it all showed me that he was created, that was created, a created narrative. Now there was some truth that was mixed in, but there was a lot that was actually put in there to push a certain narrative.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I always, say, I can't believe that the only words that Jesus spoke, especially when he was doing his ministry,
Hmm.
were the ones that are, in red.
In red,
And they're
right,
and they're all similar, right? Because Luke says the same thing, Mark says the same thing. It's almost
right.
the same thing. So I'm sure he spoke about a lot of other things. Where
Hmm.
is that information, right? So
Right.
that's one thing that people can notice right off the bat. So
Hmm.
you said so you went down what the first rabbit hole was, what the looking
The
to see who Jesus really was? Is that what you were?
No, the tithing was the
The
first.
tithing was the first one. Gotcha.
Right, right. The tithing was the first. And what was the second? I don't remember because I was looking at so many different things and I was being bombarded. And then you can only imagine, because I was going through my dark night of the soul,
Hmm.
excuse me, at that time. And I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is, but back then I didn't even have words for it. I didn't know what that was.
So what was that like? What were you feeling at that moment?
Um, to be honest, it was the worst period of my life that I could ever recall, because I remember feeling so lonely, extremely lonely. I had never felt that before, because even if I was by myself, I still had what I thought was the presence of the Lord. I still had the presence of Jesus. And when I start discovering all of this information, there was a loneliness, like that presence that I felt left me. But later on, I would discover that that's a part of the process. Actually, what's taking place is you're literally being deprogrammed.
Hmm.
You're being deprogrammed, you're having an ego death, all of that is taking place. And then I too, because I thought I was such a devout Christian, I was out there winning souls for Jesus. So when I started finding all of this out, it was a type of ego death, because now I realized that I was pushing something that was not real.
Right. Yeah.
So I had all that come down on top of me, and it was the worst feeling that I've ever experienced. I've tried to articulate it in the past, and the best way that I can explain it to someone who's never been through it is, like I said before, to you when we spoke, I said I've never been someone who would ever consider suicide ever. And I apologize if this is triggering to anyone, but I know what it feels
Hmm.
to feel so desperate, so lost, so empty, like you have nothing to live for, that would be the only recourse. That would be the only solution. I never got to that point, but I can completely understand, because I felt like I was standing on the edge. I felt like, I described this to my husband one time. I said, if you can imagine yourself being in the middle of the ocean and it's raining and it's dark, but just dark enough to where you can see that there's no land for miles in either direction, and you're trying to keep your head above water, and you're there for hours and there's nothing up under you to catch you, nothing. Because I guess that was the analogy of me being left completely alone with no God, no savior, because that was my saving grace. That was what I leaned on. When things were going bad, I leaned on the Lord, like most people do.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you have that dark night of the soul, when you have that stripping away of the illusion, you have to go through that alone. That's the part of the spiritual awakening, or the spiritual journey, that you go through by yourself.
Yeah.
And you're not really alone. Your presence is still there, but it's almost as if, when it's time to be tested, how the teacher leaves the room, or the teacher leaves so that you can have the test. It felt like that,
Exactly.
right? You can't turn around and ask questions. You can't do any of that. You're just there relying on you. And all I had was my faith in myself. I had to rely on myself. And I
Hmm.
think that's one of the reasons why I'm very adamant in telling people there's no one coming to save us.
That's
There's no
right.
one coming to save you. You have to save yourself.
That's it. You got that right. You got that right. So what led you down the path of finding this adrenochrome and walnut sauce and all this
Mhm.
stuff that is like the most horrific stuff? I mean, you're going from that dark night of the soul, you survive that, right?
Hmm.
You become strong because of that.
Hmm.
And now you're finding this information. First of all, how did you find out about it?
Um, there were a lot of things that led me to that because when I first came out of the church, remember I said I was in deliverance ministry, so I was already ready to fight demons, right?
Right, right.
And I had a group set up called Spiritual Warfare for the End Times Battle. So I was already preparing myself for that. So I was looking up a lot of things, and because I had already come through satanic ritual abuse, studying with the woman who did the blog talk, I knew about satanic ritual abuse. So I was already looking at those things that other people would normally turn away from. I couldn't find any other Christians, any other religious people who
Hmm.
wanted to talk about that type of stuff.
Yep.
So I was going down those rabbit holes myself. And I think what really started it was when I heard that video from Abe Finkelstein, and he was talking about how they bloodlet the children, and then they turn around and he said, because we don't eat the bodies, he said, we give it to our slaughterhouses, and then they make the children into hamburgers, and you eat your children for lunch, for breakfast and lunch and dinner. And when he said that, I knew that that was the truth. There was a lot of people trying to debunk it, but I knew that he was telling the truth. I didn't know how, but I
So,
knew that he was telling the truth.
so who's this Finkelstein person so that the audience can understand?
his They may have scrubbed the video now, but it was all over YouTube. There was a video by Rabbi Abe
Mm. Yeah.
Finkelstein. You remember that
Yes,
video?
I
Did you
do.
see that? Okay, that was the video that I came across. And when he said that, I knew it because it said it in the Bible. The scriptures were in the Bible that you will eat your sons and daughters. So I guess there were things that were being put before me that I would come across something, or I would look at an article and it would lead to this, that, or the other. And um, when I was crying out, when I had my mental breakdown, and I was crying out for help for the children because I didn't know who to turn to. I'm like, who comes to help when the very ones that are supposed to help us are the ones who are doing the abuse? So who do we call? And I just remember pouring my heart out. I had walked the floor maybe like 3 hours, and it was in the middle of the night. And I said, if there is anybody out there who can help, send them. And that's when I told you about coming across President Trump, who has set up the executive order to stop human trafficking.
Hmm.
But during the research, I came across some of the stuff having to do with John Podesta and his brother. That's actually where the name walnut sauce came from. That was my first time seeing it.
Gotcha.
They were talking about how they take the adrenal fluid, and they eat the adrenal fluid because from certain individuals it becomes thick. It becomes thick, and they put it on their food. So that's where I heard about it, by digging into all of that information. Because when I first came across the cannibal kitchens, and I was telling you about Anthony Bourdain, who was one of the cannibal kitchen cooks, it led to me finding out about his death. So then his death led to me finding out about Adam Schiff. And then I started digging into Adam Schiff, and that's how I start getting into all of the other information about these pedivores and pedophiles. I had
What?
never heard the word pedivore before.
Yeah. So what's a pedivore?
A person who eats children. A person who eats children.
Wow.
And I don't think I slept good ever since then. I don't think I've been able to sleep really good ever since then, because I had just had my child.
Oh.
And so I made, that was one of the reasons why I made some of the decisions that I made. Once it came time for him to go to school,
Hmm.
I couldn't, I mean, I sent him to our church school. And after that, I think he went 1 year for kindergarten, and I took him out. I started homeschooling him.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Are you kidding? Wow. You did the right thing. So pedivores
Yes,
are who in our society have you identified? I mean, I'm asking you rhetorical questions because I know the
yes,
answers to all this.
yes,
Unfortunately, maybe there might be a big portion of the audience that may not be aware. So
yes.
who is a pedivore in our society that we need to worry about, or maybe go down that rabbit hole so that we are aware. And the whole point, is to empower the audience, right? Because a
Yes,
lot of this stuff has been kept away from us on
right,
purpose,
on
right?
purpose.
And so, and the other thing I would like you to get into is why the black children? And
Hmm.
I think you also mentioned Asian children.
Yes,
So
yes.
if you can go into that, I'd really appreciate it, and the audience can understand
Hmm.
why we're having this conversation today and why this is such a critical interview. Because by understanding this, then
Hmm.
hopefully we can be empowered to do something.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Um, Once I started discovering, like I said, once you start looking things up or going down the rabbit hole, it's like it never stops. It never stops. You come across one thing onto the next and onto the next. And so I can say with confidence that there are people, not just in the industry, not just in entertainment, not just the elite that eat children. These people are everywhere. I came across someone on YouTube and they've since removed the channel. And this individual he had discovered that his roommate was going to a meat market or a butcher shop where he was getting what he thought was human meat, because of the way that it was packaged up, and was eating this meat raw. And
Mm-mm.
he was recording himself as he was
Oh,
finding things out. And the last video is of him going to the police department and reporting his roommate. I believe he disappeared after that. His channel just
oh my
went
God.
black. There was nothing else. So I began to see that there are people walking amongst us
Hmm.
that actually partake in this, and they even have things set up for them specifically to drink blood, and to get human meat. It's a little bit below the radar, just outside of our view, but they have these things set up for these individuals. So there are more. Don't just assume that these things take place overseas, or these things are happening right around us.
Let me ask you, as an aside,
Hmm.
do you think this is something that is trendy, trending? It's like people, like you just have the next best
Right.
motorcycle, or you just dye
Hmm.
your hair blue. This is something that is in, or are there
Mm-mm.
things like vampires, or this is beyond vampire, because a
Hmm.
vampire would be, drinking blood. This is pretty much eating the flesh.
Well,
Uh,
I'm sorry, I didn't
no,
mean to
no, no,
interrupt.
that's fine. You're good.
I was going to say during my research, I began to discover that this goes way back, way back. There are beings here that are connected to the werewolves. There are beings here that are connected to vampires. Those aren't just myths. Those aren't just stories. So you have one that absolutely does eat the flesh, and then you have one that drinks the blood.
Hmm.
And if you go back to the Abe Finkelstein video, he says, we drink the blood. He said, we don't eat the flesh. He said, this is why we send them to the slaughterhouse. But there are other beings who actually eat the flesh. And when I was looking into, I think I mentioned the Queen of the Illuminati, their whole website has now been taken down, but it was out there. They call her the Queen of the Illuminati. You may be able to find some of her information, Somerset Belanoff. And they were some of the ones who ate the flesh. They had a lot of cannibal kitchens that are in Hollywood and in, where the elites can get to them, because a lot of those people who that partake in a particular religion, because that's their culture. So these beings are all over the place.
So
And they
I'm sorry to interrupt. What kind of religion are we talking about?
um it's deeper than Satanism.
Okay.
I don't know the names of them because
Hmm.
there are many, but this is their bloodline. This is who they actually are.
Do you think they're off-world alien type of races that are walking on the planet? And
Yes,
yeah, okay.
I do believe that. Um, I mean, I believe a lot. I believe a lot of that stuff, and it's not simply because, I just believe everything I hear. I believe it because I've researched it. I believe it because I've been shown things
Hmm.
that were, like I said, right up under our view. We live in an illusion. When you look at the world before you have your spiritual awakening, you think this is the greatest place. This is, on earth is the greatest place. We go on vacation, we can go to Disney World, da da da. And when you have your spiritual awakening, you find out that Disney World was started by a pedophile. And then you start finding out that hamburgers and hot dogs aren't the America's favorite. They're made out of children.
Yeah.
You start discovering the evils of the world. And I think that's what the scriptures meant when it said, right now you see through a glass that's dimly lit. You have scales on your eyes. You're not seeing the real world. So once the veil is removed and you see what you really live in, it's devastating.
It's kind of dark, ain't it?
It's very dark. It's very dark. And especially for someone like myself who was discovering all of this stuff by myself,
By yourself, yeah.
right? And not having anybody to talk about. And if you did bring it up, yeah, I don't know if you've experienced this, but if you bring it up to someone who has not come down these rabbit holes, who has not had this awakening or realization, they either assume that you're crazy or they glaze over, like a cognitive dissonance sets in,
Yes. Yep.
right? And they just automatically shut you down, like they want to change the subject.
That's
It's the
horrible. Yeah.
weirdest
It's happened
thing.
to me a million
Yeah,
times. Yeah. So what's a cannibal kitchen? I know you mentioned it a couple of times. You said Anthony Bourdain was part of it, or at least a cook or a
right.
chef.
He was one of the chefs. Um, but the Cannibal Kitchen, I know the two that they spoke about on that website, and they had I believe they had a Twitter, and I have some of these pictures someplace. I'll see if I can dig them up. But they were just out there and they would have these discussions. And at first I thought it was satire, but it wasn't. It was just that they were so blatant with it because no one had ever called them out on it. This was just what they talked about. And the cannibal kitchens that I discovered, there was one in LA and I believe one in New York, but those two were ran by Somerset Belanoff's daughters. And they mentioned that they would have auctions. What they would have find the little children who, they're victims of war, where they would bomb a
Hmm.
country, and then those children, they would pretend as if the United Nations is coming in there to help these children, but they're really collecting these children for human trafficking, organ trafficking, sex trafficking, all of those things. And so they were very candid with how the process worked on their website, and they informed that they would pick certain individuals, certain children, and they would have an auction. And at that auction, the elites who took part in the blood drinking would take these children as if they were adopting them, but they would have them as a fresh source of adrenochrome or a fresh source of blood supply. They showed a chair, a special chair that they hook these children up to, and they can collect their blood daily.
Wow.
And I again, like I said, I haven't been able to sleep really well since then because at that time you would see so many of the Hollywood elites adopting all of these black children. I don't know if you remember that, even Madonna, they had,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
And that started to make sense. And but then they went on to say that the children who weren't lucky enough to be adopted off would be harvested. And then they would literally say, we thank these children for, their service, for giving themselves to us as a fresh source of meat.
Oh, God.
So
Mm-mm.
yeah, that, I mean, I couldn't believe it.
Ooh.
But so now that I guess that we can go into the part about why they specifically went after African American children, or let's just say black children,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's
All
all over
over.
the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All over. Um, when I came across black adrenochrome, I came across a scientific paper. It was a real scientific paper that showed that they had done the study on black children and Asian children. And when they're under distress, when they are, in other words, tortured to inches of their life, when they harvest the adrenal gland, it causes the adrenal fluid to, I guess, coagulate, and it creates, this is their description, a richer, thicker, creamier product.
Mm-mm. Oh my God.
So that was one of the reasons why they specifically would, now they'll do that to any children, but they prefer Asians or black children.
Did they say why in the paper? Is there,
They
besides it being creamier and whatnot, is
right, because
there, does it give it a
potency.
high?
Hmm.
Is it a specific high or what is,
Yes,
yeah,
the potency. The
gotcha.
thicker it is, the more potent it is, and it gives them a longer lasting high.
That's insane. Insane.
Hmm.
So what's the relationship with the pineal? Because I know that there's something with the pineal as well.
The paper didn't specifically mention pineal. I know that the walnut sauce was specifically speaking of the adrenal gland, and I thought it
Hmm.
would be talking about the pineal gland as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Um, I think for the pineal gland, I don't think it makes a difference in race, because they harvest pineal glands from anybody. They'll eat the pineal gland of anybody. I think you and I had discussed briefly how Dr. Yafa Bay had a video called Melanin Thieves, where she went into the fact that there were truckers who had contracts with the hospitals that would pick up the pineal gland of the patients that they had been harvested from bodies, people who die in the hospital,
Hmm.
and they would take those pineal glands to some of the elites. The elites had contracts. They all have contracts with the hospitals. Then they have certain truckers that deliver them to the elite individuals that have these agreements.
So why are people, I understand the adrenochrome, right?
Hmm.
Part
Yes,
where what they need it for.
right.
What does the pineal gland have anything to do with anything?
Now that I don't necessarily know. I
Okay.
don't know if the pineal, I'm not sure what the pineal, I haven't come across that information about, the if it gives them a high. I know the adrenochrome does. But here was another point that I wanted to say about the adrenochrome. There is a drug, because anytime this beast does something, it makes sure that humanity is also doing the same thing, so that
Yep.
it could turn around and say, well, they're doing it too. So there's a drug that out here called
Oh
EpiPen.
yeah, right, right.
That's adrenochrome. That's
Wow.
adrenochrome. Um, and it's something that, I mean, when you look it up, it's the exact same thing that they take to get a high that they give us for anyone that has an allergic reaction to bee stings, peanuts.
Hmm.
Right. Same thing.
I think that the situation with the pineal is the fact that it does that melatonin thing, the melanin creates
Maybe
that.
so.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, and I'm just guessing, and I'm just trying to understand it a little bit here with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if you, I think that is associated with the third eye. So
Yeah,
if
that
you
would make
have,
sense.
yeah, if you have all these elites, ordering it or maybe having some kind of contract or something
Mm-hmm.
with the hospitals, it's very possible that they're taking that, the pineals and the whatever in order to have divination. Maybe they have it during their rituals. I don't
Right.
know. I'm
Right.
just
Which is
saying, I mean, I don't know what the function is, but I know that that is also um, one of the glands that are really sought after by the elites, and I wasn't really 100% sure. I was
right.
hoping maybe you knew. Very, very bizarre stuff. So how is this happening now? I know that you know of organ harvesting and all that. I
Mm-hmm.
know that you understand that what's happening in Ukraine, because you mentioned how some, areas or countries or whatever are maybe in war.
Right.
Children are orphaned.
Right.
Like Haiti, for example, when that big
Yes.
earthquake happened, you had the Clintons, I believe, they put up a foundation there.
Yes.
And then they put up all these fake orphanages where they
Right.
put all the kids in there. Um, so the organ have harvesting being a trap, obviously, I think the organ harvesting being the end all of everything, because once you get the adrenochrome and you even use them for sex trafficking and everything,
Mhm.
the end would be the actual organ harvesting.
Organ. Right.
Correct. Now, what can people do, right? Once they understand that this is really happening, what can we all do to either prevent it or put a stop to, not maybe, slow it down, or how can we get involved? Because it's great that we all now know this, right?
Mhm.
But we have to be a little bit more proactive, right? We've
Correct.
got to get out of the information, right? And just leave it in the brain, in our brains, and just think, oh my God, this is horrific. But you know what? It's not happening in my house. So
Right.
I can, still go to sleep at night. How can we, how can we just become more proactive, and why is this important that we all take a stand and do something?
Um, I think the best way, and there are a lot of people who do not realize why the government pushes so hard for legal abortion,
Oh, good point.
legalized abortion, right? They don't understand, and they think it just has to do with a woman's rights or, my body, my choice. Abortion is legal organ trafficking. That is what it absolutely boils down to. And people should ask themselves, why is so much money, why so many funds put toward abortion? Because when we were sitting out for COVID, the government gave Planned Parenthood $80 billion. 80 billion. Why so much money put towards abortion instead of pregnancy prevention?
Right.
Because that is a product. Those babies are a commodity, a commodity.
Hmm.
70% of abortion clinics are in urban communities. Nobody asks why.
That's insane.
They fight so hard saying Black women are the number one women who die during childbirth. So they're literally scaring women into having abortions instead of helping women prevent pregnancies. And I think that if you just start there, that's that can spark a lot of the push and a lot of the awareness that we need for people to understand this does not have anything to do with women's rights. You have a right to your body, yes, but your right begins when you choose, when you make the choice to take birth control or use birth control. You don't make that choice on the table having an abortion. And I know everybody's torn, but this is why we all need to be on the same page with it, because you know the issue that I have amongst my people is that we scream Black Lives Matter, but you don't really mean that when Black women are they have the highest level of abortions on the planet, not just America, on the planet.
Wow.
So please tell me, how do Black lives matter when Black babies' lives don't even matter?
That's a great point. Wow. Yeah, and
Do you know?
they're trying to
I'm sorry.
harvest. Yeah, no, they're trying to harvest the Black children.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And there was a video, it's gone now. There was a video of some of the Planned Parenthood ladies who were actually selling the baby parts, and they had recorded them. A part of that video was a video of the woman saying, yeah, we go to the high schools and we hand out the free condoms. She said, but the free condoms have holes in them. And so the other individual said, and what's the point in that? She said, so that we have a guaranteed customer in 3 months.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So Planned Parenthood creates the problem and then gives the solution.
That's typical, isn't it?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's how they do
yeah,
things.
yeah. It's typical of the very bizarre shadow government that is has taken over not just this country of the United States,
The
the
world,
world. Yeah, the
the
world.
world, yes.
This is insane. Um, I don't remember how the Mandela effect, because I know when you and I had that conversation, it was a very interesting thing that you said, and I go, oh my God, that's the Mandela effect, how it
Hmm.
all tied into it. Do you remember what that was?
How, what all tied into it?
There was something that you and I were talking about
Mhm.
off air, obviously,
Yes.
obviously, that triggered, we were all talking about the same thing we're talking now, but you said something that I figured out, oh my God, that's just like the Mandela effect. And I don't remember because I know it's important, so it
Uh-huh.
might come back. I don't know. But I know that it had something to do with gosh, I
Something
can't
changing.
remember.
I remember we talked about how the words in the Bible had changed. I remember the
Yes,
scriptures.
that's right. That's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you were looking into the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
you looked in there, and the words that you had studied and you had underlined and everything
Right.
had changed. So was that something that also kind of like you were going referring back to the Bible to confirm something and then that had changed, or how did that lead to actually figuring out, oh my God,
Well, I
this
was actually, that was something, it was something that didn't necessarily have to do with the adrenochrome. I was
okay,
looking up the rapture. That's what it was.
okay, gotcha.
And there was the scripture saying that um when individuals would be taken, there would be one man and one woman in the bed, one would be taken.
Right.
And the scripture had changed to there would be two men in the bed, two men in the bed. That's what
What?
it says now. Yes, it says two men in the bed. And I'm going, that
Okay.
is not what that said. I've read that scripture hundreds of times, and
I
that's
am
not what it
I
said.
am cracking up. I can't stop laughing. I can't even believe this because
Yes.
even our conversation didn't, you didn't divulge that part. Oh my God, which tells you that it tells you, and I'm just gonna, feed this right into the idea of CERN, right?
Hmm.
What they're doing,
Right.
and they're opening up these portals and bringing in demonic spirits and all kinds of things that are just anchoring in all kinds of satanic evil, just different realities that are now changing what we knew
Right.
as truth, right? Or at
Hmm.
least we knew it then as, okay, this is the way it stated it before. And
Hmm.
now they're working with CERN because when I was a younger mom, my kids, all read the same books, like the Berenstein Bears and all that.
Right. Hmm.
And so then I learned about CERN, right? So CERN probably happened, many years later.
Hmm.
Um, and then that changed. So I'm wondering if there has been some kind of like tear, where obviously, or maybe it's not even a tear anymore. Maybe it's just an open gate. It's just the floodgates have been open
Well,
and they're bringing in stuff.
I believe that too. I believe that they did that, but it also, it wasn't just spirits, but I did a post like on my website several years ago because I had been given some insight about that. I don't know if you remember when that tunnel in Switzerland was opened, um, Gothard, the Gothard tunnel, and they did a ritual. It was a demonic
I
ritual,
remember that. Yeah.
right, that took
Yeah.
place. Now, there's a connection to the individuals who are coming over through the borders because those individuals are not who people think they are. Those individuals, um, they're being brought in.
You're talking about the southern border of the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of those individuals are being brought in. When you look at, like, maybe not so much now, but at one point in time, it was just hordes of individuals pouring in, pouring
Hmm.
in, pouring in. And they were saying, okay, they're coming from Mexico, war-torn country. They're running from gangs, da, da, da. Some, but not all. There's a lot of those individuals. I don't know if you remember, I can't think of his name. He had a book called, was it The Black Awakening? I believe it was The Black Awakening. It was a book and I read it. And it was talking about there would be an invasion. of soulless beings that would come into America. And it went into talking about, and I know this is a little far-fetched, but like I said, I've been shown some of these things that have yet to happen. There's a lot of things that I was told was going to happen years ago that are now happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I do trust that information. But the reason why the opposition is so adamant on bringing these individuals in is because that's the part of that satanic army that we
Yeah.
read about in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Those individuals are not all actually human.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And they're just pouring in and they're giving them everything they need. It's like they're rolling out the red carpet because those individuals, the Bible spoke about like sleeper cells. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you remember that. You're sleeping cells that would be activated during this time. Those are those individuals. And that's why they did not want the wall. And two, I think we had also discussed, remember I told you that when I was making that video, I also discovered that CPS, who works for that beast system,
Yeah.
when they come in and they do the legal kidnapping, that's legal kidnapping,
Yep.
they actually turn children over to that human trafficking, sex trafficking, organ trafficking network.
Mm-hmm.
They wait at the borders for those women. A lot of the women who are okay, who are, human, they wait for those women and they collect those babies at the border.
Wow. And then what? It goes into the system,
Right.
and they're sold to. They either auctioned off or
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. See, that's
We,
the first I hear about something like that. I mean, a very interesting take on,
hmm.
the situation that's happening at the border. I never even thought of that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Oof.
Hmm. They wait at the border. It specifically said, I had the article that I put in the video. It said CPS waits at the border for little brown babies.
Oh my God. And it's just the brown babies or just well, the brown babies could be, Mexican. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
brown is
Oh,
anything. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think at this point too, because of what Trump had done, like the work he had done when he was in office, it really put a damper on their network. And so I feel like they're in a position where they're desperate. They're very desperate. And so they're just letting everybody in because they need these bodies, they need that supply.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's almost as if it's almost like a takeover.
hmm, right.
Well, it is a spiritual war, we know.
Yes, yes.
So it's almost as if they're the conquistadors taking
Hmm.
over, and they're going to set up their reign
Hmm.
here on the
Hmm.
planet,
Yes,
and humanity may not even be human much longer because we
right,
have the threat of transhumanism and everything else, and all the different pokes and things that people have gotten up to this point. It's pretty scary. And then they're, of course, taking our children and torturing them in
right.
order to obtain the product, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're desecrating the most sacred,
Right.
right? Because the children are sacred. They're the closest thing to
Absolutely.
God. So they're defiling that
In
and
every way. And
in every way.
if they can't get them for organ harvesting or human trafficking, then they're indoctrinating them and they're changing the way they think,
Yep.
and they want to impose their way on them, so it's an interesting time right now. I feel like if you're not someone who understands, who knows that this has to happen, but after this happens, there's something much better because there are individuals here who knew this was going to take place,
Hmm.
who are here to bring the new way, which I think we talked about it, not necessarily new. We're actually going backwards to go forward.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So all of these things that have all these layers of lies that they put over, this is the false matrix, the AI matrix that has to come down because we have to go back to the original, the organic,
Correct.
and it. the old one has to be destroyed. So unfortunately, a lot of us are going to witness that, not necessarily take part in it. And I think a lot of us who have done the work, whose heart is in the right place, those of us like myself and you who are like-hearted, we want the babies to, we don't want to live in a world where your children are afraid to go to the playground
Oh yeah.
for fear of someone taking them and things like that. I mean, it's horrible. So we want that system to come down. I'm ready.
I am
I'm
too. I am so ready. It's just not even funny.
right.
What are your words to women
Hmm.
in your community?
Yes.
Because we all, humanity, women,
Hmm.
human women need to be
Yes.
more vigilant, right? Because
Yes.
these babies are all our babies. I'm sorry, but they are. Okay,
They're
we're
all
human
our babies.
beings.
Yeah.
But specifically in your community, what kind of message do you want to convey so that, everyone is more vigilant and doesn't fall for the propaganda of, hey, getting an abortion is the cheapest way to have a contraceptive, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
what are your words to them?
Well, let me temper my words first of all, because I have made videos that, I was speaking from my passion, like I think you and I have discussed,
Sure.
my righteous anger.
Hmm.
And when I went back and listened to it, it didn't sound great. Because I was speaking from my heart, because I feel like us as women, we have lost our maternal nature.
Ooh, yeah.
Um, we have listened to a lot of the feminist movement, which is not what we think it is, not what we were told it was. And so with us trying to push women empowerment, at the same time we're pushing abortion. That's not women empowerment. So I want to temper my words, because I can be a little rough around the edges with this message, because I see the mindset and I see how these women think, and they use it as a reason to to push themselves forward, like to succeed. So if I make a mistake and I get pregnant, I'll just have an abortion, because my life is more important, getting the bag is more important. I want to go to school, whatever the case may be. All of these excuses, to me, there is no excuse on the planet. There is nothing that should give you the green light to kill a child at will, the way it's being presented to us here and with abortion. I think, again, pregnancy prevention, there should be more emphasis on pregnancy prevention. Um, I'm not gonna say that, but I was thinking about, because the feminists at one time, they were talking about, I hate to say this word, but the P power. They were
Hmm.
saying P power, P power. And I'm thinking to myself, P power is when you know how to control yourself, and you know how to take responsibility for how your body functions and how your body works. I remember back in the day, before we had all these different types of contraceptives,
Right.
women had to count days.
That's true. That's true.
You talking about P power, or being a woman in control, you had to count your days and know what days you were fertile, what days you
Hmm.
were safe. I'm old enough to remember that.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
So if you really want to stand up and say that, that woman empowerment, no, learn more about your body and how to control it, and then take the necessary steps where you won't have an accident. If you have one of those times with your partner, and you slip up, make sure that you have something there to
Right.
protect yourself. That's how you take responsibility. You don't
Great.
do it after the fact.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah, and I think that do you know the age of the fetus when they're mostly abortion, when especially they want to harvest, because once a woman has an abortion, I think there's a certain time that fetus or has to have been in the womb or something in order to be able to harvest it for the parts. Are you familiar with what I'm saying or the
I
timing?
am, I, well, when I was listening to the lady who was being secretly videotaped,
Hmm.
she, I mean, she had different times of gestation of, I'm sorry, not gestation, but of the fetus.
Yeah, yeah.
It didn't matter. They were collecting everything.
Oh, it didn't matter, huh?
Yeah, according to her, they were collecting everything. And so, but I still feel like with them trying to bring about late term abortion, I think that has a lot to do with it too. They're trying to get the babies more to term so that they have again, this is a commodity, it's a product for them. So they have a more intact product,
Oh my gosh.
to where women can literally go up to their, what is it, 40th week?
Yeah,
Yeah, and have an abortion on the table.
exactly. When it's really it's a murder at that point, I think,
It's
right?
murder.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. And a lot of women are also being told that their babies died in
Right.
in childbirth, and they're
Mhm.
taking the babies alive,
Right.
and then they do with it what they will.
Right.
Just horrible. But we're about to end the show, but again, I just want to tell people that once you know this information is like when once you see something that you can't unsee it, once you hear this,
You'll
you
never be the
can't
same.
exactly, you can't unknow it.
Mm-hmm.
You know about this,
Mm-hmm.
and not just from this show, from this interview.
Right.
I know that a lot of people already know about this from other channels and other ways, but
Mm-hmm.
the fact that humanity is not like on the street,
Right.
like protesting. And
Right.
I don't know what has to happen. This is like the big question, because a lot of people are very careful about, saying something wrong that might get them in trouble. They might
Mm-hmm.
have their channel taken down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hear a lot of people just being cowards
Oh,
in a
yes.
call to action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they'll say something, oh, it's got to be, everything has to be peaceful
Right.
and has to be very sweet, and maybe just write a lot of letters to our Congress people, and none of that works at
No,
this.
it doesn't, because those are the very ones
Yeah.
who are behind a lot of it. But you know what, Ari, what I think is this is what has to happen, and it's what's about to happen. Humanity as a whole, as a collective, is about to go through something very, very detrimental. They're about to go through, they're going to have a rude awakening, because this is the only way it's going to happen, because they keep turning a blind eye to all of this. And when you turn a blind eye to something as heinous, like this is the worst thing that you can do, is defile the innocent, abuse the innocent. So what they're about to go through is going to be a reckoning. It's going to be put right up in their face, where they're not going to be able to turn away, and they're going to have to deal with it. And a lot of them are going to collectively go through the dark night of the soul, because
That's
see,
right.
each one of us went through it as individuals.
Hmm.
That was what helped us, because again, there is something spiritual about cognitive dissonance. We talk about it, but it's actually, that's the veil that the scriptures talks about.
Yeah.
So that's why when you can have all the references, all of the facts, and you can come and present it to someone who hasn't awakened, and they will not hear you, because they have not been deprogrammed. So what they're about to go through is going to be a collective dark night of the soul. And that is what it's going to take. They're going to wake up, but at that point, they're going to have to do certain things in order to redeem themselves. Like they're going to have to turn around all this infighting. Oh, this, I hate white people, I hate black people. By the time they finish walking through this tribulation, they're going to love one another, because all of that other stuff is going to be irrelevant compared to what they're dealing with. You're going to look to your neighbor who may not be the same race as you. And if that person, if you dealing with that person makes the difference between life or death, you're going to find a way to love that individual. You're going to find a way to work together, because that's what it's going to eventually come down to. All of these little things that we've been fighting about for all of these years, it's not going to matter when it comes down to survival, when it comes down to that.
100 million%.
Right.
And a lot of little things that are been created by design, right?
Yes.
By the opposition.
Yes.
which terrible. Yeah.
Hmm.
I totally 100 million% agree with you, Monet. And oh my gosh, you are such a blessing,
Thank you. You
with
too.
such courage, to be able to talk about this because this stuff is really difficult. And I promise you, audience, that she was very, very careful today
Hmm.
because
Very.
the other day when we had a conversation, I was really kind of sick. Really, I got sick because it just hurts so bad, and in my soul, that
Right.
this is happening to humanity, especially to our
To our
children,
children.
and especially to the Black community even
Right.
more. Oh my
Right.
gosh, it,
Who
it
don't have
just,
an advocate.
oh,
Nobody advocates for the babies.
nope.
Nobody advocates for them. So I said, send me, I'll go. Send me, I'll go.
Amen.
I will advocate for the babies.
There you
If
go.
even if I have to stand alone.
There you go. Well, you're not standing alone. You're standing with me as well.
Yay.
And many others that I'm sure are hearing this show right now. So, I want to give the audience the ability to know how to get in touch with you. So, do you have a website, or how does somebody get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. They can contact me through my website. It's called Divine Alliance. The website is divinealliancellc.com. Again, I'm Monai Gregg Stephens, but you may see a lot of my stuff under Divine Naga.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Very good. I so appreciate you. And I know that this is probably the beginning of many conversations. But
Yes,
please know
hopefully.
that I stand shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight,
Wonderful.
because this is
Thank you so much.
an amazing war that we're fighting, and it's just battle after battle after battle. And a lot of us are, very tired. We're fatigued from
Right,
fighting, but you know what? We can't, because you know what? The enemy doesn't.
right.
Enemy doesn't
He
sleep.
never sleeps.
Exactly. So thank you so much again, Monet, and you have a
You're
fantastic
welcome.
weekend. Audience, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch each other next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.